What's your opinion on GRAGAS rework? I think one of the best things we could do for GRAGAS is rework his visuals. It is not an issue that GRAGAS is like overweight. That's like a totally fine aesthetic that you can create for a character and can be really, really cool. The problem is GRAGAS's visuals were designed in like 2010 to be a joke. And like that's the issue with GRAGAS, is that he is a joke character. And like that's not very inspiring or appealing. And again, it's not because he's an overweight character, it's because he was designed to be a joke character, and that's like kind of the issue. And so yeah, I think there's like reworks we could do to make GRAGAS like a visually at least, you know, very similar to what as he is right now in terms of like, you know, heavy drunken brawler, while making it also just like way cooler. I think him being a joke makes him better. A serious drunken brawler would be so dumb. So I want to be clear that when I said joke, I did not mean you can't make characters who aren't serious. There's a big difference between making a character who is comical or silly and making a character who is a joke to be laughed at. Like, when I say joke, I mean GRAGAS is the butt of a joke. Not that he's, like, couldn't be comical or funny or silly or anything like that. Like, that's the issue with GRAGAS. One of the things you can do is, in a lot of supports, is roam, be at the right places. That is one of the things you're giving up as YUUMI. And so it's not like it wasn't my fault that we lost. One of the things is that I give up my agency when I pick YUUMI, and so I can't correct decisions, right? I just have to go with the flow. And so, to some degree, it's my fault in the sense that, like, I can't then make a play. So, like, you know, if we're blitzcrank, you know, maybe we can, like, correct by making certain plays, things like that. You made a macro mistake in champion select. Exactly. Like, that's actually a real thing, right? So, one of the reasons YUUMI, especially nowadays, is fairly bad in high MMR, is in high MMR, which this isn't, by the way. Plat's still not very high, but especially when the MMR gets higher, supports start roaming. And YUUMI can't really roam at all. She's like probably one of the worst roaming supports in the game. She used to be one of the best roaming supports in the game, because you just attach to Stylus or Hecarim and just make them invincible. Anonymous, thank you for the Prime sub, appreciate it. But nowadays, like, you can't roam, and so when you get to the point where supports are roaming and things like that, then that can be really costly. So that game, me being unable to roam, wasn't too bad, because Zeri and I, like, you know, were chilling bot lane and got some kills, all those things. You know, we had that one fight where our team, you know, had to go 1-for-1 and lose grubs, but we still got a tower for it. So that ended up being pretty chill. But there's a large number of games, especially the higher MMR you get, where if you lock YUUMI, the enemy support just roams, wins on the other lanes, and you can do absolutely nothing about it. And then the enemy AD carry will just play safe and farm under tower, and like you can also do absolutely nothing about that. So YUUMI is definitely a significant draft disadvantage, especially as you get higher up where people just roam more. I play safely in scale, I don't roam. You know, you don't need to roam, though. I think the biggest problem with YUUMI is she's just straight up worse than every other single enchanter. I mean, she's also weak. I'm just saying that, like, YUUMI does give you a draft disadvantage against certain games and certain teams. Like, that's just a very real thing. He said about giving teleported base range that you could scale and having that scale with level like other summoners. I mean, there's lots of things you could do to teleport. My personal opinion on teleport, my personal take on, like, what would be best for it, but I'm going to be very upfront. This idea also has a lot of negative outcomes. So just because I think it's a good idea doesn't mean it's actually a good idea. Like, because there's a lot of negative outcomes for top lane when teleport is nerfed. I think teleport should start on cooldown. Specifically, I don't think you should be able to use teleport until around level 3. I think that, like, if you take teleport and the enemy takes ignite and they all in you at level 1 or 2 and kill you, I think you should be out of luck. I think you should just be kind of doomed. That's my personal opinion. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's actually good for the game. There's a lot of negative possible outcomes from that. As an example, that probably makes certain top lane matchups even more binary, even more like, okay, I picked first, they counterpicked me, what do I do? Nothing, I guess. So it definitely has some like high potential for very negative outcomes. But on the flip side of things, I have the strong opinion that taking an offensive summoner spell should be advantageous in lane. And right now, Ignite just really isn't, and that makes me kind of sad, especially when like mid laners are also taking a teleport optimally every game. So that's my thought on it. And I don't think it would have to be on cooldown that long. Like, I don't think it would be need to be on cooldown past like either level 2 or level 3. It's really just like, if you take Ignite and you all in early, that's a win. That's what I wish was true. Whereas right now, if you take Ignite and you all in early, it's a loss. Like, you've thrown your lane. What a fool you are for having tried to do that. Because they just teleport back and then have like lane prio while you're half health and can freeze the wave and all this stuff. That's the rough part. What about cut teleport as a summoner spell and gate it behind an important rune that triggers its appearance like later in the game? Well, the thing is like, one of the challenges there is the game would also be pretty bad if everybody took teleport. And so as an example, when you put teleport on a lot of game systems, the potential, doesn't mean it's going to happen depending on how you design it, is that there's 5 teleports on each team, right? And so like, as an example, a solution of, a teleport's on an enchantment on boots. That just means by the end of the game, everybody has teleport, and that has its own set of negative outcomes, right? And so teleport's one of those things where it doesn't have a lot of easy solutions. And then also, like, the other thing about teleport, of course, is like anything you do that requires like trade-offs for it makes top laners feel bad. If you can't handle flame, just mute them. So anybody who says just mute lol is very uninformed, and I'm going to be honest, kind of clueless. Like, you're definitely clueless, and also I'm banning you because I kind of realized you're also just a horrible person based on what you're saying. So we'll start with that. But despite the fact that you're clueless, like, let's talk about it, right? Like, why is just mute a clueless thing to say? Like, why does that not work? And the answer is, like, just mute. Muting in a game is there to help you, like, lower abuse. It's there to help you, like, prevent negative situations after they have happened, right? So, like, if someone is flaming you and you can mute them, great, right? Then you won't be flamed by that person anymore. But by the time you've muted someone, a lot of the damage has already been done. You've already been made to feel miserable. You've already been, like, attacked, right? And so muting someone doesn't really help with the whole you feel miserable for being attacked by someone. It does help with, okay, now you have a way to stop them attacking you, but that doesn't, like, excuse toxicity and abuse being in the game in the first place. The other problem with the idea of just mute is communication is a competitive advantage. And so telling someone that in order to have a decent experience, they must be forced to lose their competitive advantage and throw it away is also, I think, an unreasonable statement. Like, you hear this a lot in regards to voice chat in Valorant. Like, hey, well, if you don't like being flamed, then, where are the cat ears? Okay. If you don't like being flamed, just mute them, Lamau. And it's like, so you're telling entire groups of players that they are forced to play the game at a competitive disadvantage because they should just mute, right? And I think that's also, like, an unfair thing to say. Like, in Valorant, in high MMRs, if you don't talk, there are games where you are actively throwing the game. Like, you'll watch high MMR streamers in Valorant, and sometimes they'll be like, a very common thing I see when I'm watching high MMR streamers in Valorant is they'll be like, this person isn't talking, they are straight up throwing. And they're right, by the way. If you aren't talking in Valorant, that's very often, like, a noticeable competitive disadvantage for your team. And so to tell entire sections of the player base to just mute and, like, that's how they should solve being attacked, like, it's not a viable solution just in terms of a game being competitive. I've nearly puked from some of the things I've heard in Valorant voice chat. So another thing I often hear in chat, which I think is really important, is if you think voice chat is all sunshine and rainbows and super nice and no one's ever mean, you probably aren't one of the groups of people who gets abused in voice chat. And so one thing I would encourage you to think about is having empathy for people who are different than you. Because some of the things I hear in voice chat when I play with my female friends are legitimately, like, actively sickening and disgusting. Like, there is some awful, awful stuff that gets thrown out by 12-year-olds in Valorant voice chat when they see, as an example, that a woman is in the game. And if you don't experience that, then you just might not be of the group of people who experiences it, or you might not play with the groups of people who experience it. And so I would encourage just some empathy and understanding for folks who have different experiences than you might have.